Hey there, John Morris here, and in this video we're going to talk about sessions in PHP. So to start this off, I actually want to talk a little bit about the difference between sessions and cookies because they're very similar, and a lot of times with the functionality you're trying to create on your site, you could use one or the other. And not only that, but in one of the next videos we're going to talk about cookies. So I just want to start off this video by talking about the difference and when you may or may not use a session versus a cookie. So sessions and cookies, what they're designed to do is to allow you to store semi-permanent data across web pages and user visits. Okay, so let's say, for example, you have some data. A good example is a shopping cart, where someone may add something to their cart, and then at the end of their shopping session, then they would go ahead and pay for those products, and then once that's done, there's really no need for that information anymore. That would be a good example of when you might want to use a session. Cookies, on the other hand, example might be something like a login. So someone comes to your site and they log in, and you store the fact that they are a registered user in a cookie that allows them to move throughout their site, throughout your site, and maneuver and all these things. And then when they close the browser, optionally you can have it so that that cookie still stays loaded in their browser, so when they open their browser back up, they don't have to log back in again. That's an example. And of course, we could talk all day about whether that's a good idea or not, but that's an example of how you might use a cookie. So the main differences between cookies and sessions are, one, that cookies are stored on the client and sessions are stored on the server. Okay, so the data that you store in a cookie or a session, again, a session is going to be stored on your server in kind of like a temporary area, whereas cookies are stored on the client's browser. Okay, so that has some implications as far as how those two different things are going to be able to interact with your site. For example, let's say you have a particular site where you have a cluster of servers that are helping power the site. Well, if someone hits your site and you start a session and for some reason their page request is transferred to another one of your servers due to traffic or whatever the reason is, that session data is not going to transfer to that other server because it was stored on the original server. Okay, so that's an example of how a session may have some limitations, whereas a cookie, since it's stored on the client in the browser, it doesn't matter what server they hit, they're still going to have that information there that you can access. Okay, so again, sessions are stored on the server and cookies are stored in the client. The second thing is that sessions are terminated once the browser is closed. Okay, so every time that a user closes the browser, that session is terminated, and when they come back to your site, it has to restart. Okay, whereas cookies can be more permanent. You can store a cookie on a user's site, and you can actually set an expiration time, so that cookie will actually stay. And if they close their browser and they come back, as long as that expiration time hasn't passed, that cookie will still be there and still work. Okay, so again, that could be for situations where you have a login and you want to have your users so that when they jump back on your site, they don't have to re-log in unless there's been a certain amount of time. Or it could be a situation where you maybe want to have a semi-permanent shopping cart. So if they close their browser and come back within, say, that same day, that their cart information is still there. That may be another reason why you would use a cookie instead of a session. So there's lots of different reasons why you may use cookies versus a session, but those give you the main differences between the two. So in this video, we're going to talk about sessions, and we're going to talk about how PHP sessions work. All right, so I've got my demo install here, and I've created some code. And as you can see, sessions are actually really easy to create. The first thing that you always need to do when you want to use sessions is you start off with this session start. What that's going to do is actually going to start the session, and it assigns, unless you otherwise specify the session ID, it assigns a specific session ID to that user. So each user who hits your site is going to get a unique session ID. So if you have 5 visitors on your site at the same time, they're not going to all get the same session ID and have things mixed up, okay? They're all going to get a unique session ID, and they'll each have their own individual sessions as they move throughout your site. Okay, so again, that's important to know. But you do that with this session start. Okay, that's going to start the session, and it's going to initialize the session ID and get you all set to go. From there, you simply would then store data in your sessions array. So you can see we have this variable here, and this is an array, much like the post and the get arrays, that we can store data into and then retrieve it from later. So what this code here that I have is basically, it says if the sessions array and the item in that array, or the key in that array called views, is set, then the session views, that variable equals the session views that it currently is stored, again because it's set, that's currently set at +1. So what we're doing is we're creating a counter here, and I'll show you this in a second. And if it's not set, then we're going to set it to 1, and then from then on it'll be set, and it'll just increment 1 up. Okay, and then down here we're grabbing that data and we're actually echoing it out. So let's come over, let's go to this demo here. And as you can see, we have this page views number here, which if we go back to we did page views, and then we echoed out the number of views, which we've been incrementing. So if we refresh this, we're just going to continue to count up, because this session is adding 1 because it is set. Okay, so you know, that in and of itself seems pretty simple. But now if we go to this demo page, okay, you'll notice that when we go to this demo page, it starts off where we were on the page before and continues to increment. And we can increment this, and then we go back to the demo 2, and you can see that again it continues to increment from where we left off on the other page. Okay, so we have the demo.php and we have the demo2.php, which have the exact same code on them. So all they're doing is just incrementing it. Now what that means is that across these 2 pages, the session data is being saved and incremented, and each page sees the new session data that was incremented on the page before. And so the point here is that you can use session data in order to pass data from one page to another in PHP and on your website. Okay, so again, that can be very helpful if you're creating, say, a shopping cart or possibly a login system, although I wouldn't really recommend it. But and another of other instances where something like this would be very helpful. Okay, so now let's talk about destroying a session. Okay, so now that we've started a session, another thing that we can do is we can destroy a session. And essentially what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to kill the session that we started and reset all of the data. Okay, so if I come and I go to our demo3.php page, you're going to see that this goes blank, and that's because I've destroyed the session. So in here there's no session data to echo out. And if I go back to the demo, you'll see that we start back at 1. Okay, so this may be a good thing for, let's say you want to clear out your shopping cart. So you could have a button that someone clicks and it takes them to a temporary page that resets their cart, does a session destroy, and then does a redirect back to the page they were on, or the home page of your shopping cart, or whatever. Gives you an easy way to destroy the session data that you've stored and reset your cart, or for any other reason that you might have that you want to destroy the information that's stored in that particular session. And then again, we can go ahead and increment back up. We can go to the demo2.php, which picks up where we left off. We can go back, and that's going to pick up where we left off here, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's what sessions allow you to do. They allow you to store that information on the server so that you can access it across multiple pages. And then of course, if we come here and let's go ahead and close our browser, and then we'll open it back up. And we'll go back to our page. And you can see that we start back at 1 because every time the browser closes, it resets or automatically destroys that session. Okay, so again, very handy. A couple things to keep in mind with this: when your data is shared from page to page or sent to the server to be stored, it's sent in plain text. Okay, so this isn't something that you want to use to send, sensitive data, unless you're going to take some advanced steps to encrypt that or protect that somehow, so that someone who could possibly be listening in on the network traffic that's going between your site and the client site, they can't sniff out that data and get that sensitive information. Okay. Also, there's some things with passing, because you can pass session data in a URL. If you're doing that, just know that that data is completely exposed and can be taken by anyone. Someone who's using your site could maybe say post a page on Facebook, and if you're storing session data in the URL, which you can do, when they post it on Facebook, that session data could be right in there, and if it contains sensitive information, well then that sensitive information is displayed. And you say, well, that's dumb, that'll never happen, but the truth is that it probably will. So just know that there are some security issues that you want to keep in mind when you're using sessions. So a lot of times it's best to stick to things that don't contain sensitive information. For example, items on a shopping cart. There really shouldn't be anything that you're passing in a shopping cart system like that where you're using sessions that is super sensitive. In fact, the only thing, if you're writing your code correctly, the only thing I could really see you passing in a session would be the ID of the product. So every product has a unique ID. You pass that ID, and then when you go to the cart, you can use that ID to populate the rest of the information in the cart by pulling it from your database. But that's a whole another thing that we'll get into. But that's about the only thing I could see storing in a session data for a shopping cart. So again, that's not really sensitive information. That's stuff that'll probably be publicly displayed on your site anyway. So again, just keep in mind when you're messing with sessions that it's transferred in plain text. So you want to be careful about what kind of information you're putting in there. All right, so like I said in one of the next videos, we're going to talk about cookies. We're going to get into how those work and how you can use those. But hopefully this one was helpful for you, and I'll talk to you again soon. Hey there, John Morris here, and in this video we're going to talk about PHP cookies, how to set cookies and work with cookies. So what is the reason that you may want to use a cookie? Or actually, to start, what is a cookie and why might you want to use it? So a cookie is essentially a piece of information that gets stored in the client browser, and in that cookie you can store certain information that you may find useful. One of the most common ways that cookies are used is for login systems, and what they allow that system to do is when a user logs in, then that PHP script can set a cookie that each page that loads for that particular system can check to make sure that that cookie exists and is valid, and if so, keep that user logged in, and if not, then log that user out. And in fact, if you don't have a cookie system in place as far as your system, then there's no way for you to actually keep that user logged in on a concurrent basis. So you could maybe do something with the database, but that's kind of overkill and not as effective. So cookies allow you to store information in the client browser that you can access on a more persistent basis, and to be able to store that data on across browsing sessions. So if the user closes the browser, then that cookie can still persist, so the next time they open that browser, that cookie will still be there. Okay, so when we talk about cookies in PHP, couple things to keep in mind is that one, cookies are stored in the client browser. So as opposed to sessions, which are stored on the server. So it doesn't matter what kind of server you setup you have, that cookie will still be in that browser as long as the user doesn't delete it or it doesn't expire. The other thing is that cookies, again, will persist across browsing sessions. So a session in PHP, when the browser is closed, will automatically clean itself up and delete itself. But cookies are not that way, again, unless the user goes in and manually deletes them from their browser, or the cookie expires, then that cookie will still be there on the browser. So that gives you kind of a semi-permanent way to store data. So when we're talking about cookies, there's really two main functions in PHP. One is the set cookie function, which is going to actually set the cookie. And then we have the set raw cookie function, which really does the same thing, but the difference is that with set cookie, the cookie or the information in the cookie is automatically URL encoded, whereas with set raw cookie it's not. So there may be a situation you come upon where you may need to do that, but for most cases you're probably going to go with the set cookie. Okay, so it takes a number of browsers. Again, we have the manual and we have the set cookie function. It's actually returns Boolean, which means it returns true if it's been set and false if it hasn't, which gives you a really easy way to check to see if that cookie has been set, and if not, then go ahead and set it, which is kind of the point. And then it takes the name, which is the only required value in the cookie is the name, and it's a string. So you set the name of the cookie, you set the value that you want to store, and again, it's a string, but we'll show you how to get creative where you can actually put an array into that value, and we'll show that in a second. Then we have the expire, which is just a time, and it's a Unix time, and it's not time from now, it's the actual time. So if you want to set the time from now, you're going to have to use some math calculations to, say, set it 30 days in advance. We'll cover that here in a second. The path, which is the path on the server that the cookie will be available on. If it's left blank or it's set to a slash, it'll be available on the entire domain. If this is set to a value, say you have yourdomain.com/members and you set this path to members, that's the only place that cookie will be available. The domain is similar, except whereas this is a subfolder or subpath, this is a subdomain. So again, if you leave it blank, it's going to be available to all subdomains. Whereas if you set a specific domain, then, like for example the www dot, it'll only be available on that domain. Secure is basically a true or false setting, and true, it'll only be transmitted over a secure HTTPS connection. So that means there has to be a secure connection for that cookie to be transmitted. That's one way to secure a cookie. And then you have the HTTP only, which means It's not going to be available to scripting languages like JavaScript and things like that, and that helps with cross-site attacks and things like that. So the big ones here are going to be the name, the value, and the expiration. Okay, and that's what we're going to cover here. All right, so let's go to our cookies demo here. You see we're on the demo3.php page, which actually has a function to destroy the cookie. So we're on this page. We can see that the cookie is destroyed. There's nothing being saved here. Now we're going to go to this demo page. When you first visit the page, of course, the cookie hasn't been set, so it's going to be blank. But if we refresh, we'll see that now we have this John Morris set as the my name variable in or the value in the cookie. Okay, and again, if we go to demo 2, now we can see that we have this John Morris function as well. So it allows you to go across multiple pages and also across browsing sessions. So if we come in here and we copy this and we close this browsing session and we reopen it, and we go back to, you'll see that we still have our cookie in here. Okay, we refresh and it's still there, and we go to demo 2 and it's still there. Okay, so unlike sessions, cookies actually persist across browser sessions. Okay, and then of course we can go back to this demo 3, and that's gonna destroy the cookie. Okay, so it doesn't exist there anymore. Okay, so that is essentially what cookies allow you to do. Now let's take a look at the code. So on the demo.php page, what we did is first we set expire time. So really this is just a math, and this is what I was talking about. So we take the current time plus 60 times 60, which gives us an hour, times 24, which gives us 24 hours. So this cookie will be set to expire 24 hours from the time it gets set. Okay, so we set cookie, we give it the name of the cookie is my name, the value is John Morris, we set the expiry, we leave all these other options default, and we set the last one to true, which is the HTTP only, so we can't use it in JavaScript or anything like that, which again prevents against the cross-site scripting attacks. So that's the way that we set that cookie. Once we set that cookie, then we can use the data from it in order to populate our site. And again, you could use this for browsing sessions. So a user comes to your site, they log in, you set a cookie that stays in place, and they can browse around inside your inside the site and stay logged in without it logging them out, because that cookie exists. And you can put some logic in there that says if this cookie exists, you know, let them see the page, and if it doesn't, redirect them to the login page. Okay, and so they can go around in all your site, and then when they click log out, then you can do like we do on the demo3.php page, which is destroy the cookie. Okay, and that way now if they want to log back in, if they want to get back access to the site, they have to log back in. Okay, so that's probably the main way in which this is going to be used. Another way that it could be used is, you know, if you want to set a cookie for regular visitors to your site. For example, there's a plugin in WordPress called What Would Seth Godin Do? And what that plugin does is if you're a new visitor to the blog, it'll have a little box at the top that says, hey, thanks for stopping by. I see you're new. You know, you might want to check out such and such page. And then it'll set a cookie and has some logic. So if you visit the site, the first 5 times you visit the site, then it'll show that box, and after the 5th time it'll stop showing it. Okay, and so then it stores that data as a cookie, and it leaves it on your site persistent, and that way every time you come back to that site in that browser, it'll increment until it gets to 5, and then once it gets to 5, it'll store in the cookie that not to show you that that message anymore. Okay, so that's another example of how you could do it. And of course, obviously, there's a lot more logic to that particular plugin than what we've just shown here. But gives you an example of how to use this. Okay, so as you can see, it's really easy to set a cookie. Again, you just need the name, the value, and the expiration. And actually, the name's the only thing that's actually required. Of course, for it to be useful, you're going to put the value and the expiration. Now what I want to do is show you how you can put your cookies into an array and be able to access more data than just one single value. Because if you notice here, one cookie will only store one piece of value, so or one value. So we're going to show you a way. It's not necessarily where you're getting around that, but to make it a little bit easier for you to access that data. All right, so how do we change this so we can access our cookie data as an array, which is obviously arrays are a lot more convenient and effective for storing data. So this will allow us to set one cookie, or if we want one cookie, but set one cookie and store a bunch or as much of data in it as we want. So the way that we do that is I'm going to go ahead and let's just edit this one, and we're going to use array notation in here in order to make this work. So we're going to call this, let's call this user data, and we're going to go my name. Okay, so if you remember from the arrays video, this is how you can access an associative array, but it's also how you can store data in an associative array. So we're going to go ahead and copy this, and let's paste it, and let's paste it again. Let's change this to, actually let's just change this to name, age, and let's go gender. Alright, and we'll set the age to 29 and the gender to male. Okay, so if you look at this, it looks like it would set three different cookies, one called user data name, one called user data age, and one called user data gender. However, if we go over to our site and we refresh this, instead what we get is we get our cookies array, but inside of it we have what it creates, essentially a multi-dimensional array. So we have this key, but it points to now an array that has my name as John Morris, my age as John Morris, and actually that was from one previous one I was testing. So now it has our updated data, which has name John Morris, age 29, and gender male. Okay, and so if we want to clear this, we come here and we clear the browsing data, and we refresh, and we can see that it's cleared, and now this has it saved with our updated information that I just changed over here. Okay, so it allows you to store it in an array, which then is a much more effective way of storing that data. And then if we wanted, we could come in here and we could create a whole nother cookie, essentially, and we could call this stuff, and we can just leave this stuff the same. Let's just change the name to that way we can see that there's different data. Don't know too many female Edgars, but that way it's different. Okay, and we come back over and we can see that now we have a second array for our second cookie, and that is the stuff array, and it has again our name, our age, and our gender for this particular item here. And so that allows you then to create one, well, in this case, two cookies in your cookies array that can store a whole bunch of information. Of course, inside this particular array inside here, you could store a whole slew or a whole database of information if you wanted. Okay, and so that gives you a very efficient way to set cookies and use cookies in your scripts throughout PHP. All right, so I hope you can really see the value of that, being able to take data and store it in a cookie and have it stay in the browser, and then also store it in an array so you can store that, kind of keep that data categorized together in a certain way. Instead of setting 6 different cookies, you've set 2 cookies, and inside each one of those you have a number of different information. Okay, and you can extend that out as far as you want to go. So that's very, very, very powerful. I mean, systems like WordPress, they use this kind of stuff to create their login systems. And as we go in the course, we're going to talk about that more. But this is very, very powerful stuff that you can use to really take your scripts to the next level. Now, one thing that we'll want to look at is, you might be wondering how I destroyed the cookie. Well, the way that we do that is we actually just set the expiry time to a date in the past. So you notice that instead of plus, the time plus, I have time minus. So I set to the current time minus an hour. And when I do that and set the cookie, it sets the cookie, but the cookie, because it's set, the time is set, the expiry time is set to an hour in the past, then the cookie is already expired. So when we go to grab the data from that cookie, it's expired, so it doesn't exist. And that's essentially how you just destroy the cookie. So that is PHP cookies. That's how they work. It's very powerful stuff. We'll be talking about these more as we get into some of the more advanced stuff. And so hopefully that is helpful for you. Hopefully you got a lot out of that, and I will talk to you again soon.